Can you please introduce yourself for us?
My name is Marcos Mora.
Can you spell your name for us?
Yeah, it's Marcos, Marcos, Mora, Mora, then Barrientos, Barrientos.
Thank you. So we have learned that you were born in Los Angeles, California, and that you grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. How old were you when your family traveled to Omaha?
We were young. My mom just went to get away for a little while, so I think I was just born over there. But but then we just came back. So I've been here all my life in Omaha.
Okay. What are some of your most vivid memories from your experience of transitioning from Los Angeles to Omaha? Do you have any memories from that experience?
Oh, the weather, we don't have the beach and the mountains close by or anything like that, so less traffic.
Yeah.
So,
tell us about your first musical memory.
well, I mean, we come from a musical family, so I mean, my grandfather was a musician, and some of my uncles. I mean, we were always around music and dance, and my grandfather's uncles were musicians. We have generations of musicians that have played music going back to Mexico, but I guess just ever since we were kids, it was just standard that they would get us involved and we would dance and go to functions and things like that. So we were kind of part of that all the time.
What effect do you think your family being deriving from music, what effect do you think that had on your life?
What effect? I think it's enriching, I guess, to this enrichment that kind of is part of the culture, kind of like a biculture aspect where you'd hear American music, standard music that you'd hear, R&B and rock and roll and things like that. But then at the same time, the culture aspect of traditional music from Mexico. So it's almost like you're bicultural because you have the best of both worlds. So that's kind of enriching to know both, aspects of that.
How did you first get involved in music?
Well, like I said, I think our families, when we were kids, kind of just standard kids, they just had us, I don't even know if we had a choice. We just started dancing, dancing and getting the outfits and doing it. I think I was the littlest one at that time. So we always got a lot of attention because, when you're kids, they're like, oh, yeah, look at these two dance. I danced with my cousin. And so, and then of course my uncles, they would dance, and other people would dance in the community and things like that. So, we'd be at these functions. You guys probably know Cinco de Mayo. At that time, they'd have smaller Cinco de Mayo functions and things like that. We would dance at that, dance at the church, just different community functions they would take us to, and we would dance, so.
What was the first instrument you learned how to play?
The first one, I think it was trumpet. I think when I was in grade school, trumpet.
What instruments can you play now?
Oh, God, there's a lot of them. After you learn one, you can kind of learn the other ones a little bit. So I eventually kind of learned guitar really well. And then from there, as I got into other different music, I learned to play like the bass. And then when I started playing mariachi, I learned how to play the vihuela, which is kind of like a guitar. I'll show that to you guys. I got it around here somewhere. And then the guitarra de golpe, which is kind of like guitar, but it's just a little bit bigger. The guitarrón, which is a big bass guitar. And then later, my grandfather played the mandolin, and we were doing some recordings, and I kind of heard in my head, it's like, oh, this needs mandolin. So I taught myself mandolin overnight and just went and played on the CD. So I think, anything's possible once you just kind of once your fingers get developed, you can kind of start to do some of that different stuff. So, and then I play a variance of just basic percussion stuff. So, and then there's other Latin American instruments like the cuatro, play, the basics on that. So, just a little bit of, those.
Would you say that your style of music that you personally make is similar to the one that your family makes, or do you think Omaha culture has influenced your music?
I love all styles of music. I'm kind of influenced from everything. I think I go off in too many directions sometimes because I love all styles of music. I think the first part of my life was the influence of my parents and their music, and then the second half, after I started playing guitar better. I played with people from Chicago and Kansas City, you know, blues and R&B, and then I think then where I found my true love was that mesh of Latin and then that soulful music, which is more of a Santana-based style. So that's kind of where I went back to lead guitar and playing guitar and kind of bringing out more of the soulfulness inside of what I feel and stuff. So that's what I'm passionate about right now.
Why is music special to
Oh, it soothes the soul. It heals you. It feels good. It could be a great therapy. You know, it's sometimes when you're feeling kind of down and out, you go write a song. Oh, I love you, you know, or whatever you're gonna say, whatever you're feeling. You know, I've done songs. You know, for my mom, for my brother, for a girl, or for this or for that. You know, so it's kind of a therapy. And also, I've had times where I've been sick. I had to go play. You know, I had 102 temperature, and by the time I'm done, I'm feeling better. You forget about it. So it can be very therapeutical too, you know, to kind of heal you. Not all the time, but I've had it happen before where I wasn't sick anymore. So.
What do you think the main purpose of music is?
The main purpose of music, I think it's just a soulful expression of what one feels inside, and just to let that out in a vibrant way.
How do you believe that you are a part of showcasing Mexican American music in today's society?
Well, our family's been here since 1926 in Omaha, so my grandfather was doing music, and later I'll show you guys some of the photos, and they were on 24th Street, you know, doing the music and the dancing, and in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and my uncles in the 70s and 80s, and then, you know, kind of we've done it too, and I've worked with kids. I worked with a lot of kids, so for about 10 years I just worked with them, and then they kind of learned the music, and then so that kind of passed it on to someone else, and now they're all out playing that, you know, genre of sharing, you know, the cultural music of mariachi and other styles of music, you know, to other people. So it's kind of cool.
Who has been the biggest supporter of your music, and how would you say they supported you?
Well, family all the time, because it's around family, you know, and family always is very supportive, you know, coming out and see me or this or that, just, you know, giving support. Sometimes the arts could be tough, you know, especially if you want to make a living at it. There's only a couple of ways if you want to make a good living, and, you know, so you can pay all your bills. But the other aspect is you're kind of an artist. They call it kind of like a starving artist, because, you know, they don't always pay a lot of money for the majority of them, but there are some that you can make good money. So I think it's just, you know, that support helps sometimes when you're kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, or blah, blah, blah. But I say that and I always come back, because I guess it just must be inside of me or something. So, and I think the community at large, and then you also have my family, and then there's certain leaders that are always supportive in the community. Dr. Jim Ramirez, he's a big one that started the mariachi program in the 1990s, and he's not a musician, but he's influenced so many people of that support mechanism of helping them.
How would you describe the music scene in South Omaha?
It's like almost like an underground scene that nobody knows about. There's so many groups. I mean, there used to be maybe one or two mariachi groups. Now, you know, there's smaller ones and a variance of those. You know, there's probably, you know, 5 or 6 throughout Nebraska in the area, and then there's all these Latin groups. I can't even keep track of them anymore. There's so many of those different groups that are out there that no one really knows about unless you're kind of in that little thing. You know, it's because they're playing like weddings and quinceañeras, but, you know, they play at the festivals. But mainstream society's not really aware of that. But there's a lot of Latin music, and not just per se what the mainstream knows is mariachi, but, you know, there's the norteño, which is kind of like I don't know, if you relate to American, it's almost like a country cowboy type of thing, but it's nothing like that. But in the cultural aspect, it's got a lot more meaning with that. And there's the banda, and then there's the tamborazo, there's the gruperos, there's all these other styles of music that are out there that are really cool, and great musicians too.
Are you familiar with any popular Mexican American music venues in Omaha, such as like the Tampico?
Yeah, in the last year, so there's the Guacamaya that has groups regularly, and some of the other. Well, Howard's has been probably the most consistent. It's the longest standing Mexican restaurant. It's been around the longest in Omaha, but they've also been very supportive of mariachi, musicians having them come there. El Dorado has some every now and then. So those are probably some of the main ones. And then you always find music at all the quinceañeras and the weddings, every weekend there's music at those too.
Just to follow up with that one, so we know a lot of these venues, some of these venues that used to be popular where they might have had a lot of mariachi or whatever, they're not around anymore. Can you speak to any of those? And I'll have you still look at Olivia though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those first ones in the earlier years, like Tampico.
Tropicana? No, it was one.
Yeah, the Tropicana, and those were, I think it was also at that time, of generational things of what were around and what they were looking for. Because in the early years, there wasn't very much. It was the first years, it was just house gatherings, because you couldn't put on, you're going to the internet or whatever you got for your music. It wasn't that easily accessible. So when you hear the stories from the old timers, the music they got was from the live music, and a lot of it was house parties in the very early years, and then Tampico, and later on Tropicana, and then those were just some of the ones that were there, and even some of the bars around South Omaha. I don't remember all the names, but they would be at those every now and then, kind of like they are now. Sometimes the musicians will just jump around wherever people are at, and play for tips or whatever. But those were probably some of the main ones. But like everything else, kind of come and go with the people and different owners, and it's hard to hold an establishment up forever.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense then, because we were trying to research some of those older venues, and that makes sense that it was just a lot of house parties and family events or stuff like that. House makes sense.
Yeah, when you go look for it, I've had assistants when I did research, and they'd say, "Oh, we're going to go look on the internet." You're not really going to find it. You got to go to the people really and get that information.
Is there any music venue that holds a special memory for you, or an event that you played at that was really special to you?
Well, I think Howard's, it was always the heart of, having mariachi musicians, and just kind of a special feeling, of playing there. And the family too. The family was so, Ordunas, they were so connected to the community, gave back to the community, and, helped out. Especially in the early years, everybody knew everybody. Now there's so many, everybody doesn't know everybody, but back then everybody did. And I think their supportiveness of the arts was always good. So it almost felt like a second home, just going in the restaurant and playing. And, you would play for the people, and they liked it. And, they would give you, at the end, you'd have food. And there was something special about that ambience of doing that. So I think that. And I think the other thing is sometimes when you touch people, a lot of it, especially like on Mother's Day, Mexican Mother's Day, which is May 10th, or someone's birthday, they'll do that a lot of time as a surprise. And so they'll have you come in the house, and it's kind of like they're reenacting the serenata, which is kind of a tradition where you're outside the house and you start playing, or sometimes open the door and you come in playing, and those people get very emotional and start crying. And to feel that emotion that you touched them and that you touched their heart just by playing that one song, and they start, showing that emotion, that's pretty gratifying. Yeah.
How does music shape culture of the community of South Omaha?
Mariachi, basically, everybody seems to like it, and that's why we play so much. I used to play a lot. We'd play like 3 to 10 times a week in about 5 or 6 states, and because people, no matter what culture, we've played for a little bit of everybody from everybody's different culture that says, "Oh, hey, we're gonna have, Mexican food or a Mexican theme or blah blah blah. Let's get a mariachi," or sometimes we'll play at a Hispanic festival and they want a mariachi, or it's a school, or it's an educational thing. But there's so many different things you can integrate that music to that it just kind of opens up that light. So I think that's good for South Omaha, to show that, hey, this music can be shared at all these different aspects, around town, and share that culture.
What do you think makes a musician in Omaha unique from other places?
I think definitely experience. I think sometimes when you go to East Coast, West Coast, you know, they used to always say like, Omaha, where's that? Or there's a bunch of cornfields there. You know, I always thought of it just as a small farm, you know, town or whatever. When there's so much more now, there's a lot of different musicians and a lot of, you know, diverse, you know, music, and there's more places, you know, being able to play downtown and around town. So I think that's, you know, good for Omaha and a lot of the different live scenes and shows that they're starting to do from, you know, some of those venues. So it's a good thing, you know, to have all that different style of music.
How do you think Mexican American music has evolved in Omaha?
How did it evolve? Well, by having more kids, you know, so they just pass it down and, you know, keep learning. So I think that's why there's so much more music now, because if you look at the early years where the community was small, there was a little bit of music, but, you know, my grandfather's time, they were really the main musicians. Those first 3 years, they were kind of the early ones in the 1920s and 30s. And then they had other groups of people that would move around, and the Huertas came in the 40s. He played, and then some more musicians came to the scene, and then you look at the 50s and 60s. As time went on, it started to grow more, and other, you know, the music expanded to where maybe it was an acoustic in the first year, but then later, as we got, I think, more in the 50s, 60s, it turned more into like a band, like a group, or maybe there were drums, and then the 70s, it went into, you know, this other Tex-Mex type of genre, 70s and 80s. And then from there, you start to see this population surge, and then you start to see more people learning the music and passing it down, and so then you see more musicians, and so that's why now it's just, there's so many, I can't believe how many there are. You can't keep track of them all. So back to the day, yeah, you knew there was 2 or 3 groups, but now there's so many you can't. So it's really evolved from those times, and part of that is because of the population growth and really the access to so much more stuff, because back then, it's not like, hey, I'm gonna go back to Mexico and get something, blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen. So now it's a lot more easier, especially with the internet. You can buy stuff and do whatever you need to get.
How does musical culture in Omaha compare to musical culture in other cities?
I think it's gotten better. I mean, in the early years, you know, if you wanted to find these really outstanding, great musicians, you know, you might have to go East Coast, West Coast, or even to see good concerts or good shows that weren't available here. But, you know, Omaha's kind of more on the map now, you know, because the city's grown. And so there's so much more available than it was before. So I think that's a great thing. So, and we have some outstanding musicians, and you see more concerts. You know, you got Jazz on the Green and all these other different styles of groups, and they incorporate all types of groups. So, and they give the Latin groups, you know, a chance to you know, to play, and along with the other genres. So that's great that we're seeing more diversity and more of everything in Omaha.
How would you restate and finish this sentence? To me, music is.
A soulful breath.
Could you say the whole sentence for us?
I'll say the sentence again. What was the sentence? Say it
To
again.
me, music is.
To me, music is a soulful breath of air.
Would you be willing to play any music for us today?
Would I be willing to play some? Maybe. I brought my electric guitar. I don't know if you'll hear that as well, but I brought the vihuela too that I can.
Sweet, yeah, we'd love
show
to
you
see, yeah, whatever you got for us.
Sure.
Is there, I guess really quick before we transition to that, yeah, any special stories or anything else that you want, that you think is so important that it should be in our documentary? Because, you know, for us, I think that you're someone who has a lot of knowledge about just the history and everything. Just anything else that you want the kids to know or the people of Omaha to know, because it will be put out there for everyone to see. So just anything else that we might have missed that's important, you think? If not, then that's cool too.
Right. You know, the one thing that I like to share that I learned I didn't have an idea about was that, you know, there's so many cultures, and Omaha's always been kind of an immigrant, you know, town. When you look at the years of the stockyards and all the, you know, the Czechs, all the different, you know, Italians, and then all these different areas, and the Mexicans were there too, and I think some people don't realize a lot of these ethnic groups have been here for a long time. But the Hispanics and the Mexican American community has been here a very, very long time. You know, since at least what I've documented as far as the contributions, you know, what we see if not long or as longer, than some of the other ethnic groups, on 24th Street, South Omaha that we see the one is sharing the culture, so we got pictures of them on 24th Street, but the music and the festivals, because that's kind of part of it is the festivals. The Mexican festivals have been happening since the 1920s. I mean, that's a long time. It's not like, hey, we just showed up 10 years ago, because sometimes people say, oh, the Hispanics, where do they come from? Well, we've been here for a long time, and probably longer than any other ethnic group consistently in South Omaha on historic 24th Street. We've been doing these festivals, and now our Cinco de Mayo festival has grown, and the one in September, some of the biggest ones in the country, where we're getting about 100,000 people coming in from 5 or 6 states, and we've got all these groups and these dancers and food and sharing, the culture, and everybody gets to see about that. So I think that's something that people don't realize. And some people that are maybe in Omaha but I don't want to go to South Omaha because maybe it's, not my cup of tea or whatever you want to call it. But there's a really vibrant culture down here that's going on in South Omaha, and it's kind of cool. And it's been other ethnic groups. It's just at this time it's just Hispanics, and there's some really good food. There's music. There's these festivals, and it's been recognized nationally. So and I think even people on maybe on the other side of town don't know that, so maybe they can come out and check it out, try some of the food and everything, and it's a great part of town. It's very family oriented. I think people think, oh my God, it's dangerous down there. No, it's very family oriented. Families with kids, and like everybody else, they want something for their kids and everything else. And so there's some really good stuff down here. This is called the vihuela. And vihuela, from what I was told, kind of means the mano. Mano is hand, of the hand. It's because they use on a lot of guitars, they'll use a pick. If some of you that are musicians, you know what a pick is, but so they're saying of your hand, you're using your hand, so you're using more of your hand, your finger technique compared to, hey, I'm going to use a pick. Just because some of the styles, this is called a vihuela, 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 and it's a traditional Mexican instrument that's played in mariachi, traditional mariachi music. And for anybody who knows guitar, there's usually 6 strings on the guitar, but this actually has 5. And it's a smaller thing, so it gives you a little bit more vibrant sound, because a guitar kind of gives you a warm sound, and this one gives you a little bit more vibrant sound to kind of complement that, because there's also guitarrón, which is kind of the big bass guitar. So it's kind of like a small orchestra, really, a mariachi thing. You think, oh, mariachi, this and that. A folk art, but it's also just almost kind of like a little small thing, because they got the violins and the trumpet and all these things, making that sound. So again, this is called a vihuela, and again, this is actually tuned, or anything, because I don't have the thing, but just to give you the. That's kind of a huapango, where they kind of sweep that. They use their fingers and sweep that. And I grew up just playing a basic guitar, and then I played a little bit of rock and stuff like that. But then when I went and learned mariachi, learned some of those different techniques with your fingers, and then it starts kind of beating up your nails and all that and stuff like that. But that's kind of the technique that they do. Just so, and then there's other rhythms. That. So this is called a vihuela. It has usually has a little bit of back in there, and then, like I said, just to kind of get that vibrant sound, to get that out there. So it's a cool little instrument.
Thank you. I know Veronica had some follow-up questions.
Sure.
So you were just talking about how, even though for a lot of people it's unknown that Hispanics or Mexican Americans have been here for quite a while, since the 20s, they have been here. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how your family in particular came to be in Omaha.
Right. Well, our family came in 1926. I know he was asking about the picture there. It actually was the brothers, my great-grandmother, and the kids, crossed over in 1926 in Texas, and then well, the one brother came first to see if there was work, and there was work, so then went and got the rest of the family, and then they came back and started, working, and then eventually my grandfather met my mother, and our family is the Barrientos family, and we have, I think as far as we know, we're the largest, Mexican American family, here, because back then they had a lot of kids. So and then, all the brothers had kids, 7 kids, 12 kids, 8 kids. So we had so many cousins, everything else, we didn't even know them all. It's like, oh, you can't date her, she's your cousin. There were just so many of them. So yeah, from that, they just kind of grew and got involved in the community throughout. I know Juan Barrientos is very involved in the organization, with the Mexicans, and then later my uncles were very involved, kind of in that Chicano movement in the 70s. One of my uncles was one of the founders of the Chicano Winter Center, which is Latino Center of the Midlands. So our family's always been very involved in the community and the art side, but also the aspect of the community, just the social part of the community too.
Wonderful. So the first person in your family came to Omaha in 1929. Where exactly were they coming from? This one person, and then
Right.
the ones that followed after that.
Yeah, so it was 1926, basically from Aguascalientes. Aguascalientes, yeah. So they just eventually, came from there, and we still have some family that are still there that, I guess generations that are still there that didn't actually come over. But yeah, just coming up from Aguascalientes and crossed over and made their way here. And I think it's just like any other immigrant pattern. People hear about work, oh, hey, there's work over blah, 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 or blah, 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 then they go there. And if you look at that time of, one is people working in the fields, but they worked actually at that time, they worked in the packing houses, so we got pictures of my grandfather, and which was really hard work. They just worked in the packing houses, and they played music on the weekend, and my grandmother sometimes would sell food on the side, and yeah, our family, we just grew up right down off of 23rd and, 23rd and Q, over there by St. Agnes, and, my grandmother's was there, and that was kind of a special time too, because it was so much different. That heart of the community or your family, we would, go to their house every Sunday. So it's like your aunts and uncles become just like your mother and father, because we're very close, and all that. And we still, to this day, my aunts and uncles, I invite them to everything, because they're just because we go into their grandmother's house every Sunday. Your cousins become like your brothers and sisters, because you all grew up together and played outside and did this and that and did so many things together. So the family's always been, very tight. And our family's kind of broken into threes, because when they came, there were the 3 brothers, and then, of course, everybody had their kids, so there's kind of the 3 areas. One is from Juan Barrientos, and then there's also Pamphilo Barrientos, and then there's Vidal Barrientos, which is my grandfather. So.
Now, you've already mentioned a few of the musical influences that have influenced you, such as you mentioned Santana, you mentioned the influence of mariachi music. Would you say that most of the music styles that have influenced you have come from the Mexican side or more from the American side, or was this more of a mesh of the two?
I think it's a mesh of the two. I mean, I love the Latin rhythms, and I like all styles of music, so it depends what kind of mood I'm in, Like when I work out, I like to listen to rock, and I listen to rock because of the beat and ding, 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 and of course in Christmas, like Christmas music, but then I listen to Christmas mariachi music too, So it's kind of listen to both. I love all styles of music, so I think it's just that collective, pulling all of them together, So, yeah, I just like everything. It's hard to say, oh, which one do you really like? I mean, I think as far as now where I'm at in my life, it's more of that Santana where you can just kind of make the guitar cry and just let it out, to express that. But I have mariachi CDs too, where I wrote in Latin music and wrote songs for this, wrote that. But yeah, I like a little bit. And then there's Trio, which is, very popular with the requinto, and I love that little guitar playing and things like that. So just a little bit of everything, really. Just depending, again, what mood I'm in that month. Or sometimes you go and these different genres. Or hey, this year I'm getting to that, and then I go into this and that, and a little bit of everything, you know.
And would you say that that's been the case for the bigger picture, for like the whole of Omaha, where they have been influenced by different musical genres as well? Or did you see that at, do you know, or did you see that at any one point they were particularly influenced by one, like mariachi was very popular maybe during a specific decade?
Well, I think some of the different styles of music, like banda, they stick pretty, strong to the genre of what it is. I think sometimes in mariachi we went a little bit out and mixed it, and then some people would say, oh, you can't do that because keep the traditional folk art of what it is, playing the traditional songs. But like when we play, I actually learned it from somebody else because, again, you're bicultural, and you're sometimes playing for Americans. After a while, after an hour of it, don't really know what it means anymore, unless you grew up on that music. Music that you grew up on, you can play it all night and enjoy it. But if you didn't grow up on it, you don't know it. You kind of lose something from it because it doesn't have that feeling because you don't know what it's all about. But so what we started to do was incorporating American music with it, where we play like Blue Moon, with the mariachi, and then we'd sing it in English, and play all the instrumentation and all the other stuff. And I think lately another one we just did an Elvis song, and then all of a sudden they change, like, oh wow, music is universal. It doesn't matter what kind of genre, you can play any style, and that's where you start to connect with people, like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. I didn't know you could do that. Do the Nebraska fight song. You going from Rancho Grande into da 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 da, and the people are like, wow, and then they start clapping and dancing. So now you've made a connection. How do you connect with the people? It's just not, we can play for ourselves, but I think as an artist, I think what some people don't realize is, yeah, sometimes when you're at your home and do whatever, maybe you record that, you play that for yourself, but then there comes a point when you're a performer, you got to kind of play for them and play for everybody. And that's where it becomes a little fun if you can really get them to relate and have fun with it.
And then, bringing it a little bit more to today, what do you think are some of the influences that are continuing to bring Mexican Americans or Mexican immigrants to Omaha?
Why do we think they're still coming here? Or?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think they're coming here as strong as they were, but I mean, the patterns have slowed down as far as immigration. But from 1990 to 2000, Nebraska was ranked number 10th in the country for the largest growth. And with that, we kind of saw where in the 80s, South Omaha was really going, because that generation was getting older. They didn't have a younger generation to come up and do that. So when that happened, we saw this boom. It's like, wow, revived South Omaha and start building these businesses. And now like Benson and some of these other areas, there's no vacancies, So the population has really, helped out South Omaha in doing that. So, but a lot of that was because of jobs and people hear of jobs and people are creating their own thing. Now you're seeing the smaller businesses, Latinas and everybody doing where they're doing the cleaning or they're doing concrete or they're doing a little bit of everything. And, people are starting to develop businesses, and so that influence of kind of the American dream. Hey, I'm going to build something for my family and start a business or do this or do that on the side, and so it's really, really, really grown, and it's a positive aspect I don't people realize that's going on. There is a lot of positive stuff going on. More positive than negative.
Right. And as somebody who's not from Omaha, I was not aware of it, but it is pleasantly surprising. And then, my last question is, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about this space. Is there a history to this space, or is there a special use to the room that we're in?
Well, I mean, the space. When I was out of college, I was playing music, and I went across the country and played music and played with some incredible musicians that were better than me, but they made me a better musician. There were guys I met this guy from the South, the South played just a different style of, music, and guys from Kansas City, Chicago, and kind of more blues guys and R&B guys and then Tex-Mex guys. I played with all kinds of people just all over, just kind of absorbing it, learning, and was more of a student when I was in my early 20s and doing that. And then when I came back, I was like, oh my God, I got to do something with my life. You know, I can't make a living off this. So I went back to college, and that's where I really started getting into mariachi, learning more about mariachi, and that's what got me through. That was my part-time job of playing mariachi on the side. I only had to do a couple gigs, and that's like working 5 days a week, and only had to work a couple, and they fed you, you know. So I think that part really was something kind of, you know, special about that. So from there, I started a company. So I went back so I could go to school, and I ended up starting a company. I started the first Spanish Yellow Pages, and then the Perico newspaper, the first bilingual newspaper. So because I was doing photography, I got lucky and got a photography job at the university, and I take pictures of my friends. And someone says, "Hey, can you lay out this book?" And you know, since we want you in charge of the photography and lay out the book. I never laid out a book. I just went and studied a program for about a week and laid out my first book. And I learned everything as I went along. And then we got a place on 24th Street, and then we ended up buying this building from there and getting that. And then we had this building for a while. We had the Perico, and we growed the company, and then we eventually sold it. But that's what this building originally was. But in the early years, from what they told me, it was, the original, OPPD building. So this was one of the first ones that was here before us. Gary Castro could know about the history about that, but otherwise we've been here for a while, and we've had a recording studio in the basement. We've done a lot of different stuff, just depending on the time period. But so that's a little bit.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like to play anything for us? It could be for either instrument. You don't have to sing if you don't want
Right.
to. If anything
Yeah, I'm
you'd
not
like
much
to
of a
share.
singer, but.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, and this is out of tune. I mean, the electric guitar, and I don't know if you'll really hear it either. I mean, some of the different picks, but, and I'm used to using my fingers since I do that in mariachi anyway. You know, I'm trying to think some of the other rhythms that they do. Can you hear that? A lot of people like Wanta Romero when we go to different places, you know. The other one, of course, when we play like La Bamba, they all like La Bamba. So that's kind of always a crowd pleaser. And then, you know, of course, when we play Santana, everyone loves, you know, Oye Como Va. That's kind of a universal song that everybody knows, you know. And then sometimes in concerts, you know, if I want to show off, I'll start, you know, playing like this and play behind my head and do all this stuff. Kind of known for jumping too. When I play, I like to jump in the wherever and do that. But you know, when Santana does a lot of his stuff, it's got that soulful feel. And like I said, when I played more of the jazz and the blues, there's other techniques that I learned, you know, playing these octaves, you know. So, just.
I'm morbidly curious, because you mentioned the Nebraska fight song. Can you do it with the mariachi theme?
Well, it's a trumpet player that's playing the melody. You know, all we're doing is just. You know, and we're just doing that. Where, you know, you could have, again, a Mexican song that's doing the same thing, you know. And, you know, we're just taking that rhythm and just kind of putting it in there. So sometimes we try to have fun and throw those American songs in there when we're doing that.
Yeah, that's
So-
awesome.